The briefing chamber carried the stale scent of recycled air and decisions that could never be undone. General Varath Kessin sat at the head of the elongated table, silent, the blue glow of tactical displays reflecting across his scales. 12. Senior officers waited for him to speak, but his attention remained fixed on a single number: 12,000. The Dominion had ruled for 6 centuries and governed 1,000 star systems. They had fought wars that erased billions of lives. By comparison, 12,000 should have been insignificant, a statistic small enough to disappear inside administrative records. Commander Yell activated the tactical display. A planet rotated slowly. On the screen, now dull and gray. Only 3 days earlier, it had been vibrant with oceans and vegetation. Kepler 442b had been secured for Dominion settlement. Human resistance, Yell reported, had been minimal. The word lingered in Varath's thoughts with an unfamiliar weight. There had been no orbital defenses. Number-organized fleet-only surface communities composed largely of agricultural workers and research personnel. The plasma bombardment lasted 4 hours. Varath realized that during those same 4 hours he had been eating dinner and privately listening to human music, a habit he never shared with others. When he asked for casualty figures, Yell reported 12,047 enemy combatants eliminated. Varath leaned back slowly. Moments earlier, those individuals had been described as farmers and scientists. The room grew quiet when he questioned when civilians had begun to qualify as combatants. Yell explained that standing doctrine classified any species refusing evacuation orders as hostile. The humans had been granted 14 days to abandon the world. They chose to remain in their homes. Varath studied the lifeless planet on the display and imagined the ordinary routines that had unfolded there only days before: meals prepared, work begun, futures assumed. None of those futures would occur. For centuries, he had believed warfare was governed by calculation alone. Measure losses, balance outcomes, maintain advantage. Yet humans possessed a peculiar custom. Each death was recorded, each name remembered. He recalled reading this detail in an intelligence report and feeling unsettled by it then, just as he did now. When he asked for humanity's response, intelligence reported protests, diplomatic complaints, and extensive media coverage. There was no coordinated military action. Human nations remained divided, engaged in their own conflicts. Some officers found this amusing, interpreting it as weakness. Varath did not share their confidence. His aide, Fessin, remained silent as well. When asked for an assessment, the young officer hesitated before explaining that humans possessed a concept known as righteous anger. When severely harmed, they abandoned internal disputes and concentrated entirely on the source of that harm. Shortly afterward, an updated intelligence report arrived. Every human government had suspended its conflicts, and all military forces were returning to their home world. News of Kepler 442b had reached Earth only 17 hours earlier. Varath issued orders to strengthen border patrols and requested complete intelligence archives on human warfare. Months passed in silence. Listening posts detected no transmissions, no fleet mobilization, no visible preparation. Across thousands of human languages, however, one phrase repeated across open frequencies: "We are counting." Dominion leadership interpreted the silence as collapse, but Varath remained unconvinced. His nights were consumed by historical records detailing human wars of immense destruction, followed by rapid reconstruction. The pattern suggested not surrender, but preparation. The silence ended when Perimeter Station Feta abruptly ceased transmission. There was no distress signal, no debris, no evidence of attack, only absence. Moments later, a single small human vessel appeared within sensor range. It broadcast a steady stream of names, ages, and identities. Victims of Kepler 442b. The transmission repeated continuously across every frequency. Vorath watched in silence before instructing his officers to prepare. The humans, he concluded, had finished putting their house in order. 200 Dominion warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in flawless formation, their arrival shattering the quiet of the border sector. From the command deck, General Vorath Kessin studied the opposing force already waiting in open space. The human fleet numbered only 40 vessels, many clearly outdated, their hulls bearing the wear of long service. Several appeared to be retrofitted civilian ships. One broadcast loud music across open channels, rhythmic and aggressive, echoing strangely through the tactical audio feed. Commander Yell regarded the display with open disbelief, noting the overwhelming disparity in strength. Vorath did not respond. He was watching the human formation with careful attention. The human ships maintained a tight wedge pattern and advanced directly toward the Dominion line without hesitation. They neither scattered nor attempted evasive maneuvers. At Vorath's order, a communication channel was opened. He delivered a formal demand for surrender, citing their inferior numbers and obsolete armament. The reply came from a calm human voice that identified him by name and acknowledged the destruction of Kepler 442b. The message was brief. They had arrived to collect. The transmission ended immediately afterward. Dominion weapon systems engaged as the human fleet accelerated. Space filled with converging fire plasma streams, guided munitions, and focused energy beams. Direct impacts struck the lead human vessel, collapsing its defenses and tearing through its structure. Despite catastrophic damage, the ship did not withdraw. Its trajectory remained fixed as it rammed the Dominion cruiser at full velocity, destroying both vessels instantly. Shock spread across the Dominion command network, but the advance did not slow. A second human ship, heavily damaged and drifting, reignited emergency thrusters and altered course with deliberate precision. Its pilot maintained control long enough to collide with a dreadnought at lethal speed. Vorath observed the battle unfold with growing clarity. The humans were not maneuvering for survival. They flew as though survival was irrelevant. Additional audio recovered from one vessel revealed a human voice calmly singing while her ship burned around her. The recording continued until impact terminated the signal. Dominion firepower eliminated most of the human fleet within minutes, yet each destroyed vessel inflicted disproportionate damage before its loss. The engagement lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 197 Dominion warships had been destroyed or rendered inoperable. Only 3 human vessels survived, heavily damaged, retreating slowly while continuing to broadcast the names of the dead. Silence settled over the battlefield, broken only by emergency signals and drifting debris. Officers across the Dominion command deck struggled to comprehend what had occurred. When Commander Yell asked what kind of species would sacrifice itself in such a manner, Vorath answered with quiet certainty that the humans were not discarding their lives, they were spending them. Every military doctrine relied on a threshold of acceptable losses beyond which forces withdrew. Dominion strategy set that threshold at 15%. Human strategy, Vorath concluded, operated without such a limit. Their willingness to sacrifice extended to totality if required. The realization altered the nature of the conflict entirely. An intelligence update soon followed. The human fleet was no longer limited to 40 ships. Industrial output across Earth had surged without interruption for 3 months. Every manufacturing center, every orbital facility, every available resource had been redirected toward ship construction. The number of vessels now approaching Dominion space exceeded 4,000. Vorath considered the scale of mobilization and recognized a pattern consistent with historical precedents he had studied. Humanity was not reacting impulsively. Humanity was executing preparation on a planetary scale. Standing before the observation window, Vorath watched debris from both fleets drift together in indistinguishable fragments. The war had transformed from territorial expansion into something else, entirely a reckoning measured in lives rather than victories. He instructed his officers to begin counting Dominion casualties with the same precision humans applied to their own. The conflict, he understood, had only just begun. The Dominion home world had not convened a full military assembly in over a millennium, yet the Great Chamber now stood filled with every ranking commander the Empire possessed. General Vorath Kessin sat among them, studying the massive tactical projection dominating the far wall. Thousands of red indicators marked advancing human vessels, their movements steady and unhurried like an inevitable tide. Reports had arrived continuously over recent cycles, border fleets erased, defensive installations neutralized, colony systems falling silent. The pattern was always identical. Human forces arrived, destroyed military assets with precise efficiency, broadcast the names of the dead, and departed without occupation or demand. The Supreme Commander addressed the chamber with controlled urgency, outlining concessions previously unthinkable. Outer territories would be relinquished. Resources, technology, and formal reparations would be granted. Even an official admission of fault would be offered if it would halt the advance. No officer spoke in opposition, yet no one expressed confidence that such measures would matter. The war had ceased to resemble conventional conflict. It had become an accounting. An announcement interrupted the session. A human diplomatic vessel had arrived and requested landing authorization. The report emphasized a single ship and a single passenger. Permission was granted. When the human representative entered the chamber, she appeared physically unremarkable, an older woman with composed posture and steady eyes. She wore formal civilian attire without military insignia. The only ornament she carried was a small circular pen engraved with thousands of microscopic names. Introducing herself as Ambassador Elena Vasquez of a unified Earth Authority, she placed the document upon the central table. The Supreme Commander assumed it contained negotiation terms. She clarified that it did not. The document, she explained calmly, was an invoice. Upon examination, the contents revealed a structured list of individuals associated with the Kepler 442b Bombardment Command Authorities, operational officers, and ship captains. Each entry included identification, role, and confirmed participation. Silence overtook the chamber as comprehension spread. The ambassador explained that humanity was not seeking territory or material compensation. Their demand was accountability, measured at the level of decision and action. The conflict, from their perspective, would conclude only when the cost of what had been done was fully answered. Her tone remained measured throughout, neither threatening nor emotional. The statement was presented as fact rather than warning. Vorath observed the reaction of Dominion leadership with detached clarity. For centuries, Imperial doctrine had treated war as a balance of power and resources. Humanity, however, was conducting something fundamentally different, an enforcement of memory. Their operations did not seek expansion. They sought settlement of a debt. The ambassador's presence confirmed what the past months had suggested. The humans had completed preparation. What followed would not be negotiation, but resolution, carried forward with the same deliberate patience with which they had counted every name. The ambassador's document remained at the center of the table long after she finished speaking. No one attempted to touch it. The Supreme Commander requested clarification regarding the consequences of refusal, but Elena Vasquez did not alter her composed expression. She explained that humanity did not threaten compliance. It demonstrated outcomes. Systems that had launched the Kepler operation had already experienced targeted strikes. Military shipyards were dismantled, command relays disabled, and strategic depots erased with precision that avoided civilian populations entirely. Humanity, she stated, had no interest in conquest. Their objective was completion. General Vorath requested access to recent engagement data, and the chamber displays shifted immediately. Recorded footage showed Dominion defense platforms failing, one after another, under coordinated assaults. Human vessels did not linger once military targets were neutralized. They departed after transmitting a standardized message listing the names of Kepler 442b's victims. In several instances, Dominion evacuation craft were permitted safe passage without interference. The pattern was consistent and deliberate. War, as the Dominion had defined it, was not being waged. A systematic dismantling was underway. Several commanders argued that surrendering personnel listed in the document would compromise imperial authority and fracture internal stability. Others insisted that resistance remained viable, given the Dominion's remaining fleet capacity. Vorath listened without interruption before requesting permission to speak. He addressed the chamber without theatrics, presenting a simple analysis. Humanity's operational behavior demonstrated unlimited temporal commitment. They were not constrained by territorial urgency or resource scarcity. Their campaign would persist until its defined objective was satisfied. Conventional deterrence, therefore, possessed no relevance. The Supreme Commander asked the ambassador whether any alternative existed. She responded that alternatives had existed before Kepler 442b was bombarded. Humanity had issued evacuation appeals and transmitted civilian registries. Those transmissions had been disregarded. The present condition, she said evenly, was not negotiation but consequence. Her gaze settled briefly on Vorath, as if acknowledging that he understood this distinction fully. An urgent transmission interrupted further discussion. A central Dominion shipyard had ceased operation after precision strikes disabled its reactor network without causing atmospheric breach. A second message confirmed loss of a communications hub coordinating 3 frontier fleets. Each report followed the same pattern: targeted, controlled, and accompanied by the recitation of names. The chamber's atmosphere shifted from defiance to recognition. Vorath studied the list once more, tracing the structured order of responsibility from highest authority to operational executor. He recognized that the document was not merely an accusation. It was a framework. Humanity had defined an end state and was methodically advancing toward it. When the Supreme Commander asked whether compliance would conclude hostilities, the ambassador answered with measured certainty that the conclusion would arrive when the accounting was complete. The session adjourned without formal resolution, yet the direction of events had become unmistakable. As the ambassador departed under escort, Vorath remained seated, aware that the Dominion now faced a choice between preserving an illusion of control and confronting the cost of its own decisions. Beyond the chamber walls, reports of additional losses continued to arrive with precise, unhurried regularity. The silence humanity had once offered had not been emptiness. It had been preparation. The Dominion Council reconvened in a reduced chamber, the atmosphere stripped of ceremony and urgency, replacing tradition. Reports now arrived with such frequency that summaries replaced full briefings. 3 additional military installations had been neutralized within a single cycle. Each strike followed the same disciplined pattern: defense grids disabled first, command nodes severed second, propulsion infrastructure dismantled last. Civilian transit corridors remained untouched. The message attached to every engagement, repeated without variation: names, dates, and confirmation of loss. Humanity was not escalating. It was proceeding. General Vorath addressed the assembly with a revised assessment built on observed outcomes rather than doctrine. He explained that the Dominion still possessed numerical superiority in several regions, Its superiority had lost strategic meaning. Human forces did not contest territory. They appeared where responsibility could be traced and removed the capacity for further harm. Their tempo remained controlled, neither rushed nor delayed, as if guided by a schedule independent of opposition. The council listened without interruption, recognizing that resistance now prolonged damage without altering direction. Debate shifted from military response to political consequence. Several officials argued that surrendering individuals listed in the document would fracture imperial unity. Others countered that continued refusal had already fractured security. Intelligence confirmed that internal systems were failing faster than replacement capacity allowed. Supply chains had begun to stall. Communications experienced intermittent blackout. The empire was not collapsing under assault. It was being methodically disassembled at critical points of function. Ambassador Vasquez returned to the chamber upon request. She carried no additional documentation, only the same composed presence. When asked whether partial compliance would alter humanity's course, she clarified that accountability could not be fractioned. Responsibility had structure, and the list reflected that structure precisely. She emphasized again that humanity sought no territory, tribute, or dominance. Completion, she repeated, was the only objective. Her tone contained neither urgency nor satisfaction, only certainty. Varath requested permission to speak directly to the ambassador. He asked whether humanity would accept acknowledgement of error combined with permanent demilitarization of the Dominion's frontier fleets. She answered that acknowledgement without responsibility preserved the condition that produced Kepler 442b. Humanity did not intend to preserve that condition. The statement was delivered without accusation, as if describing a physical law rather than a policy. As the session concluded, an updated projection displayed the remaining operational capacity of Dominion forces. The trend line descended with steady precision. No sudden collapse, no chaotic defeat, only a continuous reduction measured against an objective defined elsewhere. Varath understood that the Empire's greatest vulnerability was not its losses, but its delay in recognizing what this conflict had become. Humanity had transformed war into reckoning, and reckoning advanced regardless of resistance. The chamber emptied slowly. Outside, the Empire continued to function, but its systems now operated within narrowing limits. Varath remained for a moment, studying the list once more before sealing it within a secure archive. The conflict had not reached its end, yet its conclusion had acquired form. When the accounting finished, the war would end not with victory or surrender, but with balance restored. Implementation began without announcement. The Dominion released a controlled statement describing an internal review of command responsibility, but the meaning behind the language was understood across every sector. Individuals named in the human document were quietly removed from operational authority and transferred under secure custody. The process unfolded with rigid order, avoiding spectacle, yet nothing about it felt voluntary. It was not surrender in form, but it was unmistakably concession in substance. Human operations responded with equal precision. In regions where identified command structures had been dissolved, planned strikes did not occur. Surveillance vessels passed through contested systems without engagement, verifying conditions before departing. Where responsibility remained unresolved, dismantling actions continued exactly as before. The pattern confirmed what Ambassador Vasquez had stated from the beginning. The campaign adjusted only to completed accountability, not to promises or declarations. General Varath oversaw the transfer of several high-ranking officers from strategic command facilities. He observed no celebration among Dominion personnel, only a strained discipline shaped by inevitability. Reports indicated that civilian populations had begun to recognize the structure behind events. Public unrest did not rise. Instead, A quiet comprehension spread that the conflict possessed an endpoint defined by fulfillment rather than victory. Stability, paradoxically, improved as uncertainty decreased. A final assembly convened to assess the remaining list. The number of unresolved entries had diminished significantly, though each remaining name represented a position once considered indispensable. Arguments for continued resistance persisted in limited form, grounded in preservation of imperial prestige. Varath addressed these claims with measured clarity. Prestige, he stated, had already been replaced by consequence. The only remaining decision concerned duration. Ambassador Vasquez attended the session at the Council's request. She confirmed that human forces had suspended several scheduled operations in response to verified transfers. When asked whether full compliance would conclude hostilities immediately, she answered that conclusion would occur upon completion of accounting and verification of structural change preventing recurrence. Her language remained exact, leaving no space for interpretation beyond what had been consistently presented. As the session ended, a final transmission arrived from a frontier system long considered strategically vital. Its military infrastructure had been rendered non-functional without loss of civilian life. The accompanying message contained the familiar recitation of names, followed by a new line, verification pending. The implication required no explanation. The process had nearly reached its end state. Varath exited the chamber aware that the Dominion had entered the final phase of a conflict it no longer directed. Humanity had not imposed rule, demanded tribute, or occupied territory. Instead, it had enforced a reckoning with deliberate patience. What remained was completion and the shape of whatever order would exist afterward. The final transfers occurred under controlled observation, verified through channels agreed upon by both sides. Dominion officials delivered the remaining individuals, listed in the document with formal acknowledgement of authority and record of command decisions. The process unfolded without spectacle, marked only by documentation, authentication, and silent confirmation. Humanity did not accelerate the conclusion. It validated each step with the same measured discipline that had defined every prior action. Across contested regions, human vessels altered posture from engagement readiness to monitoring configuration. Surveillance arrays confirmed that dismantled military structures remained inactive and that command hierarchies responsible for Kepler 442b no longer possessed operational capacity. Scheduled strikes were withdrawn in sequence. Systems once marked for action passed into quiet verification, their status recorded and transmitted without commentary. General Varath reviewed the final report within the council chamber that had witnessed the conflict's turning point. The projection displayed no remaining entries requiring resolution. For a prolonged moment, no one spoke. The absence of further demands, threats, or conditions produced a silence distinct from fear. It resembled closure, unfamiliar, restrained, and irreversible. Ambassador Vasquez addressed the assembly one last time. She confirmed that humanity considered the accounting complete, and that all active operations would cease following final verification cycles. Humanity would not remain as an occupying force, nor would it impose governance. The purpose of the campaign, she stated with composed clarity, had been fulfillment of responsibility and prevention of repetition. With those conditions satisfied, presence was no longer required. In the cycles that followed, human fleets departed along vectors announced in advance. No celebratory broadcasts accompanied their withdrawal. The last transmissions received by Dominion channels contained only archival records of Kepler 442b's civilian registry, preserved without alteration. The message carried no accusation. It carried memory. The Dominion system stabilized gradually as emergency protocols transitioned into restoration. Military production remained suspended by internal decree. Civil authorities assumed expanded oversight of frontier policy, restructuring command pathways that had once enabled unilateral action. Change did not arrive through triumph or defeat. It emerged through recognition that consequence had defined the limits of power. Vorath stood before the chamber's observation window as the final human vessel vanished beyond sensor range. The conflict had ended without conquest, yet nothing remained unchanged. The Empire retained its territory, its population, and its voice, but it no longer possessed the certainty that had once guided its decisions. In its place stood an understanding, shaped by loss measured, acknowledged, and completed. The war concluded not with victory declared by one side, but with balance restored by the fulfillment of responsibility. Humanity had entered the conflict without threat and departed without claim. What endured was the record of what had been done and the knowledge that silence, once offered, had not been emptiness, but a warning understood only when consequence arrived.